if we are in some form of connection with community, with land, with other beings, again, what I experience and what I see is that that actually brings a kind of creative energy, a creative intelligence starts to come through that then you can begin to work with in whatever way feels right for you, whether that's gardening, playing music, creating something in your community, writing, art, food, whatever it is, right? Any kind of creative practice. Because I think it really matters as well to hear, just to feel what people are feeling, to experience how people are feeling through creative practice is essential. And if anything, just so our future ancestors, whoever they might be, have got some fucking idea of what the hell we were feeling at this moment, I mean, at the very least, let's just start creating more so that at least there's some artifact that says, oh God, actually people were feeling quite a lot.
Welcome to the Passing Through Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring those spaces not just within, but also between and around us. The cracks in the walls, the moments between the moments. I speak with thinkers, authors, artists, teachers, and everyday humans who have touched the edge of the ordinary and found something to bring back. It is hot. I know that it's summertime here in the Northern Hemisphere, but this extended heat wave that I am coming to you live from has been absolutely oppressive. I'm fortunate right now that I'm coming to you from an apartment where I could record the intro to this episode. But when I recorded the episode a few days ago, it was probably 37 degrees Celsius. If you are coming from a Fahrenheit country, this is something like over 100 degrees. And I had the misfortune of recording that episode live from inside of Wilma, my Volkswagen Transporter. So as you could imagine, this was like being inside of an oven. Or if you think of me as a frog, a sweaty, slimy, salty, glistening, amphibious creature, my car functioned as a kind of cauldron where I was slowly cooked alive. Or at least that's how it felt to me at the time. I was comforted to be accompanied by a fellow sweaty, shirtless compatriot by the name of Dan Burgess. Dan Burgess is a fellow podcaster, thinker, rambler, econaut, and I don't know, I'm sure there are a million other words that I could use to describe Dan, but he and I have a lot of shared interests. He cares about the planet. He cares about change. He cares about bringing a better world into being, and he's been active in this space for a long time. His podcast, the Spaceship Earth podcast, if you've never heard it, is one that I recommend you listen to, and I'll have links to that in the show notes. Dan has a lot of spinning plates. In this episode, at one point, you'll even hear him tending to some bread that he was in the process of making. So this podcast is very alive, it's very zesty, it's very yeasty, and we cover a lot of ground. We talk about weathering the storm. We talk about building relationship with the land. We talk about the importance of recruiting young people into this space, specifically men. We talk about a lot of things because this is just a rambling, ranting podcast, which is something that I haven't done in a while. And I was really excited to sit down with Dan, a fellow rambler, because Dan sees these rambles as a sort of social technology, and I would tend to agree. So join us on this ramble and ride with us on the storm on Spaceship Earth during a heat wave while baking some bread and sweating together on the land. You can find Dan at danburgess.earth. You can listen to his podcast, the Spaceship Earth podcast, and I'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes. So if you want to become crew, I encourage you to go check out those links. And without further ado, let's ramble on. So, Dan, it's great to be here with you. People can't see us, but it is the first time that I have been shirtless with another guest sweating in a kind of virtual sauna. So I'm ecstatic to have you here and share this experience with you.
It's a pleasure to do some sort of virtual sweating with you, Danny. And I don't think I've done a tops off podcast either, actually. I might have done one of my solo excursions, but never with a fellow human. So it's good to do this together.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's an honor to sit with you because I've been a fan of your work for some time now, and whenever I listen to you, I always have a sense of a kindred spirit, that there's someone thinking about these things and moving in this world and doing things that I find important. And so, yeah, you are at the intersection of so many of those things. So it's great to just have some unstructured time with you and move through a space and ramble and talk about things that are important and do it without a goal or a direction. So I'm really grateful for your time and for your willingness to do this with me.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. And I guess this is a sort of perfect invitation, isn't it, to ramble together somewhere in 36-degree heat as the world is melting around us. It feels quite appropriate in some ways. What else is there to do right now?
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of some of my fondest experiences at Burning Man, where you're sitting in the sweltering heat of the desert and there's just chaos all around you and everyone's having experiences and there's art and chaos and grandeur and magic and terror and all of that stuff. And you're just sitting at camp with a bunch of people sweating, talking about your life and really making these beautiful connections. So it really has a bit of that vibe for me. So I'm happy to be in this space with you.
It's definitely quite a surreal time, at least where I am at this moment this week. And I'm sure by the looks of things, and many people, at least all over Europe, are in this kind of, it's just, I mean, it's been happening right every year, but it's it just seems to get more and more absurd, and the way that we speak about it, and the sort of the stories that get told about the moment we're in, and we're all trying to sort of keep functioning. And I was with my daughter this morning, and she's got the dog like in a duvet cover with a electric fan blowing. It's like at breakfast time. It's like, yeah, this is quite odd.
I saw that video.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
It was pretty funny.
Yeah, and it's like I'm noticing in like one of our sort of local WhatsApp groups, there's quite a lot of trees coming down at the moment, like big limbs of trees in the last week, and it's interesting seeing how people respond as well, because obviously the first thing is we've got to move this tree because we can't get the cars through, and it's like, but sort of no one's really talking about the stress that the trees are under, and the sort of,
yes.
And there's obviously a lot of human stress that we're all experiencing. Of course, that's really important. But there's all these other beings that are very, very stressed, and we know the trees particularly are under so much stress from, it's been lack of water, and then it's been heat and too much water, and all of these things that are kind of impacting this other life, and seeing these things kind of dropping. This week we had actually on Monday we had a storm that came through here Monday night, which was like, I've never seen anything like it here. I mean, it's what I imagine a cyclone to be like, and we don't really expect those in Somerset in the west of England, but it was like that. It just came from nowhere. This heat was building, and then it's got darker and darker, and it was completely like, it wasn't predicted. There was no warning. It just came, and I think there was a tiny bit of rain forecast or something, and this thing arrived, and it was like. And it was insane, all the trees were like bending, and the wind speed and the amount of water that was coming off, and the roads buckled outside us because of all the storm flow systems were overwhelmed, and
wow.
And then it disappeared, and it was kind of like, and then you start, so it's really, and I know there are many, 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 many people who are experiencing this all the time, on different parts of this earth, but starting to see these things. And I guess I'm just really curious how people are now responding to this stuff. It feels like there's a sort of, the awareness is obviously growing. More people are recognizing that it's not just good for, good weather for ice creams, which the media tends to still do, and good business. But starting to sort of question. We've had schools shutting this week, like my daughter's school is shut. I don't think I've ever seen that happen for heat before. So yeah, anyway, that's the context. Hence, we're sort of semi-naked here having a conversation.
Yeah, I like this topic of storm and what to do in the storm, because the storm isn't always necessarily suggestive of water. I guess in this case it was. And we also had a storm over here in Poland on the day before the solstice. We were holding space. We were in the middle of an event in a sweltering yurt. And I'm sure everybody wished that they could take their clothes off, but that wasn't really possible at that moment. But the heat was so oppressive and sweltering that, to your point, like for so much of recent times, the rhetoric has always been that climate change is a distant threat, that it's not really here yet, and if we don't get our act together soon, there will be consequences. But as you've pointed out, the consequences are here. They're at our doorstep. Things are happening in unprecedented ways. And the connection that I see between storm and this type of stuff is that when we were in this space and the skies opened up and the rain was just beating on the yurt and it was flooding in through the sides, and people were worried. They're like, is the yurt going to hold? The wind was whipping. What are we going to do? What we did was we moved the circle closer. Everybody came in together and really literally sat closer and supported one another and held one another and weathered the storm together. And that gave me such hope that community and coming together, and not just with our human community, but community with the wider earth and the more than human world, is the way that we can work through this storm. And if we don't do it, if we can't come together in that way, then I don't know if we're going to make it.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, 100%. I think that's the place I've got to over the years. It's like, it's the antidote is the reconnection. It's connection back into these, I guess, older ways, but bringing them into this moment of communing with each other and the land and, our more than human kin. And I think it's what we witness, right, and experience is that there is possibility there, which we can't, I think, often, find it hard to understand that until we're sort of experiencing it. It's not, it's intellectually quite, people go, oh yes, community is important, but actually, I still see these things playing out, like the trees falling and this and that. And the response is still very much, it can be very much, when is the council coming to sort that? Or when is the it's like, it's still this quite sort of individual, I'm removed. But obviously, as that stuff starts to fall apart and the ability for councils and services to deal with this, never-ending, growing tidal wave of needs that is happening and will continue to happen in places, it's the coming together that's vital, is going to be the only way and is becoming the only way. And it's funny, when you're talking about storms, I was reminded a little bit of, again, how the land or how how we can be, by paying more attention to these bigger cycles that are at play, with the earth. Also, what that can open up. Last year, through our Becoming Crew work, we've been doing these, what I would call kind of action learning experiences for, peer learning, groups of people kind of learning together again about, how to be more with these bigger cycles of the planet, and how does that play out into the place that I'm in, and how might that be a way of moving back into relationship with something which can maybe help shape what is mine to do, or help inform what is mine to do in these times. I know in the last couple of years I've been starting to work exploring how we might be able to do this with a younger generation. Typically it would be people mid-career and onwards that would sort of come on these experiences, and I've been really curious about how to support a younger generation. And actually we had a group of young men on the land last year in September, and they'd gone out to do, we were just having a 24 hours with them, really just to explore a little bit about what it feels like to be a young man, sort of, 18, 19, 20 in this moment, and really allowing the land to sort of shape that 24 hours. And we'd just put them out on a solo on a Sunday morning, and they'd all gone out and sat under a tree somewhere on this, it's like downland, and And literally, as they'd gone out, this massive storm came through the valley, and it ripped through like thunder, lightning, intense rain. And I was a little bit kind of, myself and my fellow guide were a bit like, shit, should we get them in? Just like, no, just trust, let them be with it, you know. And they came back up to the roundhouse an hour and a half later, and around the fire, and we didn't really have a roof. We'd been building this roundhouse. It didn't have a roof. It had a parachute. The parachute was ripped to pieces. It was old, and water was like pouring through, and we got them back into circle, and they're all kind of soaked, and we're all sitting there sort of dripping around this fire, this wind, and actually we ended up, this conversation ended up like, you know, you've all been born into these really stormy times, you know, and how does one live well in stormy times, you know? And one of them had said, what happened out there when I was under this oak watching this storm, he said, I've never felt so alive as I did in that moment. In any part of my life that exists out of it, I've never had that feeling of aliveness. And then that just opened up this conversation about, living in stormy times, and what does it mean? How do we build the capacity to live well in stormy times? And anyway, there was a little ramble, but it just came up. And I think there's something, again, it's like with the connection, when we have that connection to others, to land, to our bodies, to other things that are going on around us, what I see, at least what I experience, is that the potential to be in with the complexity is accelerated. The ability to be with that is increased, is, you know, so
Yes.
we have less of that, I can't, you know, how are we going to do stuff? So I really believe in that connection as a fundamental sort of foundation to how we step into this time.
That story is great because it really speaks to this quote that's in my mind a lot these days, where it says, collective hearts need to bear the burdens that individual hearts can't, or collective hearts need to heal collective wounds. And so you're speaking directly to this, and everyone is living in that storm. And how do you trust the process through the storm? Because our institutions, our education systems, our incentives, none of that really encourages anyone to try to build resilience in that and sit with it and work with it. Instead, we always rush to fix, to control, to change. And so what has your experience been like doing this work? How do you find trying to teach people to build that resilience?
I mean, it's hard, right? Because it's so hardwired into the reality that we're enmeshed in. You know, it's like deep code. And I think also we're complex beings, aren't we? And we sort of intellectually, we can sort of know something, or when something isn't right, but also, you know, we're also kind of caught up in this thing. And so I think, which is why I'm very interested in sort of action learning, practice-based learning, I guess, continuous learning and unlearning as a sort of way, or inquiry maybe, or living life more through inquiry, because then we got something to come back to, you know, to sort of notice our assumptions and our biases and our ways of, you know, the wants we have, or the ways that we see things. But it's really hard, because you can have an experience on the land or in community, or where you sort of feel something different, you know, and you sort of, you know differently somehow, you know, something has shifted for you, and you understand that your participation is essential, you know, like whatever this future is that we're trying to dream and bring into being, you know, it's not a sort of linear, gentle transition. It's like we're in it, and it's messy, and actually what I do, what you do, what we all do in the moment really matters. So you can sort of feel that, and then I think go back into the constructed reality that we're all enmeshed in, you know, and all the other kind of plates and threads that we have to hold on to, and responsibilities. And that knowing can disappear, you know what I mean, or get, you know, it's like it didn't, you felt it, but then suddenly you're back into this machine, and we're wanting things to happen, and we're expecting things to happen. And how do you stay with that understanding, that knowing that, you know, how you show up is really important, creating the capacity for you to have that resilience, that capability to keep going when, you know, you're struggling to find work, or, you know, yeah, it's complex, it's messy. And I think, again, the only thing I think I've maybe learned is, coming back to what we just said, the need to be in community as a regular fundamental practice, both with humans and more than humans. At least that's where I've got to. It's like that, making time to listen. I think to listen, predominantly to listen to others, to listen to your body, to listen to the land, the earth, to other beings. That feels to me like a sort of foundational practice that can build incredible resilience and possibility. But it requires that ongoing commitment and showing up, and that's hard for folks. I you know, I'm not underestimating how hard that is, but I do think that is the foundation. That's the stuff that when that isn't there, you know, I know it in my own practice. You know, when I haven't been sitting in circle or in a space where I'm listening to others and what they're experiencing, you know, if that goes for too long, without that, I feel it. You know, I get too caught up in my own shit, and that there is this medicine of listening to others, and the witnessing, and the intelligence that can come through that, which feels very simple, and it is, and being out on the land, or sitting with a tree, or tending to something, or, you know, tending to something that is more than human, that, you know, being in the presence of something regularly and trying to tune in and trying to just sit or be. I mean, and, you know, again, and they can be seen as, like, you know, by those who are sort of in more in that kind of like, oh, we just got to get on, and, you know, what's that stuff. But I mean, you know, I think over the years I've come to realize that's foundational for something really truly regenerative to really take hold. It will require these kinds of practices to spread and to become foundational and to be seen as foundational, because I think that's what everything else in this entangled life-giving rock that we're on is always participating in. That there is a presence, a listening, an observing, a noticing, a connecting, a communing that's kind of going on, as far as we can tell. Yeah. I don't know where we got to there, what we even started that with, but
No, I really enjoyed that. I thought it covered a lot of ground, and it inspired an important question, I think. So I'm happy you went there, because you gave voice to the naysayer a bit. You said, oh, what are you doing there? What are you wasting your time sitting there listening to trees and sitting with people in circles when the world's on fire?
Right.
And that resonates with me, because I used to kind of have that perspective on things, you know.
Me too.
Even Buddhism, which I really love, and I practice Vipassana regularly, I felt it was maybe a little too self-absorbed, like there were fires to put out before we should sit down and meditate on our breath. You know, we should make sure we have clean air to breathe first. So I can resonate with this perspective of somebody who says, is that really helping us? But my experience, like yours, has been that, in fact, it is foundational and it is really important. And I wonder if we could speak to that person, because so often I find myself preaching to the choir, where it's like people who already agree with us are bought into this and they're feeling good listening to this, going, yeah, they get it. They're dialed in. But really, to build community with those people who don't feel like they're in community with this concept, I think is the frontier to expand into. And it's a challenge, because I don't know, you know, even if I was speaking to myself, you know, a few years ago, it would be difficult to convince me that there is fruit on this tree. And I wonder, have you dealt with that directly? Do you have any insights or ways to meaningfully address that perspective?
I I've experienced lots of resistance to these kinds of things, and myself included over the years. I spent a good 10 years on very outwardly focused kind of change based work. Creative campaigning. Innovation, collaborations of to try and tackle big systemic issues, and all of that. I'm not saying was loads of beautiful things emerged through that work and experiences and learnings. But I think for me, it's not binary, any of this. We need all of this. So for me, this is foundational. This becomes foundational for then giving us the ability to act and do things in ways that are much more, they're just informed by an intelligence that is much more nuanced and is coming from that person's knowing. It's not coming from what they're being told to do or told to know in this very heady way that many of us see the world. And I'm really interested in that question, like, what knowledge are you trusting and whose knowledge is it? And so this way of knowing. And so for me, like, this work, if all we were doing was convening and sitting in circle and, sitting with the trees on its own, yeah, that's slightly ridiculous. But if we're foundational as a way of understanding entanglement, systems, relationships, all of the things we know are really at the heart of the crises, because we don't perceive the world through relationships and connections and entanglements. We just see it as this separate thing, to be manipulated and controlled and whatever. So this stuff, I think, is where we really begin to know relationality. We understand complexity, understand systems, understand all the stuff that's very hard, again, intellectually to sort of grasp. I mean, you can grasp it, but actually then to actually feel it. So for me, this is the feeling. This is how we feel it, how we know this stuff. And it can give us enough, I think, that then with the practice, that's why we always talk of, with the work that I do of becoming crew. It's an active thing. We're not sitting here to be, we're wanting to step in. We're saying, what is mine to do in this time? What is this place that I'm in? What is happening around me? Where can I be of service? And we have to participate in weaving something that's emerging from this time of, collapse. So for me, the two are really important. It's the dance between the sort of knowing that maybe is perhaps it's more internal, although I find these distinctions quite confusing as well. It's like, I'm knowing it in me, but it's nothing to do with what I'm knowing out around me. I mean, it's all of it, isn't it? But
yes.
But there's something about the practice in order then to sort of, to be able to be in this time and be in this world and to do the things that maybe we feel we need to do from a place that feels much more informed. And yeah, there's a sort of deepening sense of why I need to do it this way, or that's where I've got to. And so then how do you bring more people in is the big question, right? That everyone is always struggling with. How do we preach beyond the choir? How do we get out of our bubbles? How do we get out of all these things? And I think it's probably never been bigger, that question at the moment. It's a difficult one because you can also get really, at least in my experience, really obsessed with trying to reach all these people that you think you have to reach. And you can spend all your energy trying to reach these people that you need to reach, and you don't reach them, and you're burnt out and you're kind of disappointed. I think there's something about how can we always try and invite others in to these things? Is there always a way of thinking about who's not in the room? How might we find some other voices and bring them in? And even having that as a principle, just as a design principle when you're doing things, or how can we show up? How can we bring these ideas or these practices into other communities, other places? And yeah, I think, at least from what I've learned, is just to try it, just to try experimenting more, and knowing that you're never going to get this right, and knowing that there's always going to be people that, you're going to piss off, or who won't agree with you, or just think you're a twat. And that's just, that's okay. But trying to show up, maybe trying to bring these into other places, trying to introduce these practices into contexts that maybe where they're quite unusual. I've just come off this weekend a bi-regional project here that I'm part of called We Are Avon, which is a sort of river-based It's a movement for land and river regeneration in this Avon Valley. But we did pilgrimage this weekend, and pilgrimage is a really interesting experience to bring others in because it's walking. And there's something about walking through the land, I think, at this moment, which is really powerful as a way of processing the things that don't make any sense. And let's face it, there's quite a lot of that. There's quite a lot of that going on. But as a way of also opening up new perspectives. And there's something very interesting about walking with strangers as a way of understanding more about each other that, again, is yeah, it strikes me as quite powerful. And being on the land, something is opening us up. You know, we're discovering parts of a land that we all live near, but we might not have a clue it even existed. And there's something about walking, and maybe it's something about the fact that you're not looking at each other. You know, maybe there's something about the way that we walk, which I find can be really helpful in opening different perspectives up. And walking's a fundamental human thing. It's good to move. It doesn't really matter sort of your political kind of beliefs or whatever. So I think some of these kinds of experiences could be really helpful for us to try to do more of at this time, to bring more people in. And of course, through that practice of walking, then we'll stop, we'll have breaks, we might sit under a tree by the river. You know, the pilgrims often will call, let's do silence for this next 10 minutes of this stretch. It feels like a real special part of the river. Let's just stop talking. Or someone might bring a song in or something. And so there's these little moments that I think can help soften people a bit maybe and bring them in ways that perhaps, you know, come and be part of this grief circle might be a little bit too much. You know, so I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it's sort of little hacks, little remixes, little reframes of stuff which can give people a little bit of a feel for some of these practices, a gentle way in. That's what's coming up, and that's something certainly that I and with my collective are trying to do more of, to bring others in.
Yeah, I like that a lot as well, and I think you're spot on with that. It needs to be inviting. People need to not feel forced or that something is compulsory. They need to be sort of disarmed. They need to be disarmed in a way that is persuasive, not in a way that is coercive. And it's funny, as you were speaking, I had a flashback to a time in the time before time when I wasn't living in a van and traveling around speaking to people with no shirt on and sweating. And I was living in New York, and I was, I don't know, in my early 20s, and I was working at the Apple store, and we had been piloting like a new thing where you would go out behind the barrier, behind the counter, and interact with a customer who was having a technical issue, let's say. And I noticed very quickly that if I stood directly in front of someone and we tried to work on their problem, I became their problem. And as soon as I put my body beside them and we were shoulder to shoulder, looking at each other from the side on how are we working to solve this problem together, I would say there was an 80% improvement in outcomes, in the way that people perceive things, because they felt invited. I'm no longer some arbiter who's dispensing wisdom or going to give them their fix. I'm not in their way anymore. You know, we are working together. And these subtle things are really invisible to most of us, but they carry enormous weight and impact.
Yeah, I think there's something really in this, isn't there? It's back to the how we're trying to do this work, and encouraging ourselves to play a bit more and experiment a bit more, and just realizing that again, this is at the heart of it. It's the relationality again. It's like how is this person going to feel, and you know, what could I do that might, you know, rather than just trying to sort of hold the thing that I'm doing really tightly and like this is how we do it. It's like, yeah, what can we do to sort of help others in or give them a sense of what's at the heart of this, like little tasters, you know. And I think these little dynamics that that you just spoke of, and that it really struck me on the walk at the weekend, of just that ability that you could walk side by side with someone, and stuff can just come out, you know, and it's okay because you're moving as well. And I love walking because I always think that walking is, I'm pretty sure that's why we've got two legs. I think we're supposed to walk. I think we have this, I think something comes through walking with each other that it's a type of knowing, I think, that that I find is it's very hard to get to sitting around a table or so. Yeah. So I think we're in this time where we want to be playing with this stuff and trying new ways of, because I think fundamentally at the end of the day, I still do believe most humans, when they can get into the heart space, we genuinely want, or we're generally moved by similar things,
Mm-hmm.
So how can we get more into that heart space? That's the question, I guess. What are ways in where we can bring others along with us and get there, so that we can be and speak as more from that human place, not in this stressed out, scared, angry headspace.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, and I notice that a lot. I think that is a huge obstacle to, communion, to coming together, to seeing one another, to witnessing, to hearing, to receiving, because most of us in our day-to-day lives are so full. We have so much stuff inside, and there's very little capacity to hold what someone else may bring, especially if what that person is bringing is telling you to go fuck yourself.
Yeah, right.
Or screaming at you in traffic, or whatever the case is. That will just cause you to overflow, melt down, start shouting. And then what could have been something that you may have been able to diffuse if you had first disarmed yourself, now you are just in a spiral, and now you have an enemy, and maybe someone's watching you outside of your house at night and planning to,
Yeah, right.
to do all sort of unsightly things to you. But it's like, if we practice listening, and we practice emptying, and we practice really trying to see the good in what someone's telling us in these spaces that I'm in, and I'm sure you see this too because you're doing this emotional work. It's like a lot of times people have so much anger in what they're expressing or how they're expressing that it's difficult to hear the care underneath it. But almost always, if you really try, you can usually hear concern, worry for maybe protecting the group or protecting someone else or protecting someone who isn't in the space or protecting themselves. But there's this shield of anger that's a very effective shield, and it creates a lot of distance. But most of us don't even realize that we're walking around with a shield thrust in front of us, and we're wondering why we feel so anesthetized and dead and disconnected. We first have to really sit in and work to metabolize and start to deal with these walls we've put up.
Yeah, and I think that's why, I guess, in my own practice and what I can offer out into the world is where I've got to is that the need for these experiences to happen on land where people can even just as a principle of even just kind of basic circle work, it will be like, okay, before we start, let's go and find a tree for 10 minutes and just be with that, and then we'll come back, and then we'll start. And then there's something about, at least what I see and what I experience, is that the land will open, it just opens us up in ways. It diffuses, it allows stuff to move, it helps us, it's mirroring us, it's doing all of these things that helps this deepening, this softening. And so for me, it is this dance between this greater living world thing that we're part of, and all of the impacts and effects that can have on somebody. Is what I mainly experience is that it's very helpful. It can help us be able to be more with what we're sitting with and recognize it more, and for more empathy to come, and for more openness to come, and for more vulnerability to come. And for me, these are all really important qualities in this moment. Probably always have been. And so while you're always going to have to sit with what is there for people, and sometimes it's really distressing, and there's anger, but there's something about feeling, I think it's just a way that people, again, back to the knowing, they start to feel that there's something else going on that they can't say it's this and it's that, but just something is happening. And I'm pretty confident it's, you know, it's our earth kin that's kind of like helping us tune in that there is more going on. But I find, of course, and I know that that's difficult as well, because then there's, you know, it's hard to find those environments for many of us. You know, we're in these mad concrete tech sort of, I don't even know what it is, this machine environments that you know, are not helping our nervous systems right at all. I mean, they're so, you know, we couldn't have created a more fucked up thing. If you want to, like, let's really fuck everyone's nervous systems up completely, right? We've done it. Okay, it's like, and yet at the same time, it could be one of the most simplest things to reverse. You know, if we just stop pumping billions into road development and just start rewilding cities, you know, just start bringing this life back for everyone, that they can actually feel and experience it around them. And we know how to do it. It's so simple to do it. It just needs will and commitment. And I think that, again, I'm not saying it's going to solve everything, but it will change how people begin to feel. It will do something to bring us back into some sense of, you know, that there is something else here. But yeah, where I've got to in my work and my life and this life stage that I'm at, and where I've got to, I'm lucky. I live in a place where we have, you know, we have access to a lot of more than human nature, you know, around us. And so I have just decided to center my work there with that context, because, and that's part of my inquiry, to really understand how does that shift things? What difference does that make in helping us, you know, step more into this time and be more open to each other and able to deal with complexity and all of this stuff. So yeah, not helpful if you're like 36 degrees in the middle of London in your van, I know, but and someone's just slapped a parking ticket on you and blah blah blah. You know, I mean, I get it, but that's the moment we're in, right? It's just full of contradiction, and you know, I think that's the other thing. We just got to get more comfortable with this absurd contradiction and talk about that more. I think that would be helpful, because I think that's the thing. But many of us just can't see that there is anything else. We just think this is it.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. And before I even say this, I want to check in with you, because I know that there's an organic process happening.
Oh gosh, yes, good call. I should probably turn the dough.
This is the first time on the Passing Through podcast where bread is being made while we're speaking.
Yeah, I know. It's a long process, this sourdough making. I kickstarted it last night and then realized that would mean I'd have to be turning it during this conversation. So, but you know, that's, you know, it is a living thing. It needs tending to. It's all about relationships, this bread. So I'll just go and turn it, if that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Danny, for reminding me. See, it's in here. This is it.
Nice. Yeah, we're having a bread break. I like it. Some people break bread, but we're doing something else.
Thank you.
No problem. We're all in service to the bread that is in service to us.
Yeah, so. Exactly. I mean, I have a thing in my house. Like, if I know that if there's no bread in the house, I'm basically juggling too many things. You know, it's kind of like, so it's become a sort of a bit of a marker of how balanced am I at the moment. And we can go several weeks sometimes where I'm not baking bread, you know, because obviously it's just, that is our lives, right? But it has become a bit of a barometer to me of am I giving? Yeah, am I chasing too many things, spinning too many plates, and I haven't got the ability to make bread, which is the fundamental thing. Like we need that.
Yeah. There's biblical wisdom in there, our daily bread.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Pre the Chorley Wood process, it was a superfood, our daily bread, but then it got fucked over by the industrial processes, like most things. But it is coming back. It is you get your flour from a farmer that's growing wheat with love, and it's been gently milled, and these things are like fermented superfoods. I mean, you can literally, it's high nutrition, and yet most of what we're being offered is the complete opposite. Anyway, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, but I'm happy that it's here. I'm happy it has a home here, because everything you're saying really resonates with me, because where we just had this event, our friend has a farm there. He has like 15 hectares, and he's dedicated a lot of his place to ancient grains. So he has like einkorn, and I forget the names of them, but they're all these ones that are literally like in the Bible type grains.
Yeah,
and
right.
He cares for them, and he gently mills them, and he's taught me how to do it. So I was there making bread. So you and I have this bread connection, and I totally, if I didn't have that experience and taste what the bread tastes like and how rich it is and nutrient dense and nourishing it is, I wouldn't understand what you're saying. I would just say bread's bread, but bread is not just bread.
It's really not just bread. For me, it is a sort of metaphor really for the times we're in, because it's just such a, to have good bread requires time, it requires connection, it requires relationships, it requires care, all of the things that a capitalist society cannot do, because you can't do care and capitalism. It doesn't work. You wouldn't have a business. So, which is why, anyway, that's a whole nother podcast as well.
But this is a bridge. You just built me a bridge back to where we were before the bread break.
Good.
Which was, we were talking about how absurd and surreal this reality is. And I was realizing this the other day as I was on the bus in Poland, and I have kind of stepped outside into the liminal edge of being able to look back at the world that I spent my whole life growing up in and see it in a different way, which is only possible once you have distance and a different perspective becomes possible. And I was sitting on the bus, and I noticed that everybody is just so absorbed. They're in a vortex of their phones and their responsibilities and all of these kind of societal decrees that come together to help cohere capitalism. They reinforce it. They keep people distracted on a hedonic treadmill, on bills, on having to work, on having to amass wealth, and all of this stuff. And I was sitting there realizing, wow, this is a collective hallucination that everyone willingly participates in, and it's become so deep and convincing that people have forgotten that they are willing this into being, and we do have a choice. It becomes so deep and complete and convincing that we forget that we have a choice to do something else. And I think that's where enchantment work becomes really important, where if you do something as simple as like go out into the forest and eat some mushrooms, you suddenly realize like, oh wait, the world is much more strange and vibrant and beautiful than I thought it was. And you start to create distance. And it doesn't require going out into the forest to take mushrooms, of course, but this is a pretty easy way to do that. I'm not advocating people do that, just to be clear, but you know what I mean, that you could really see how absurd this world is once you can look at it from a different angle. But if you're not afforded that luxury, you can't even have the reflection, really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's it's the word you use, and it's perspective. Like, how do we help? How can we spread the ability to cultivate perspective? Because it's so hard for people to imagine anything different. But with perspective, that's the thing, right? It's when we are able to see in more on what we are. This reality that feels so fixed, and when we're and of course there are many ways of doing that, and non-ordinary experiences increasingly feel to me like, again, essential things in the toolkit. Not that any of these things are silver bullets, but as practices, as experiences, things that can help us shift, get unstuck. I always feel like there's I always come back to stuckness. It feels like we're very, very stuck, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you sort of unstuck yourself, or how can you help others unstuck themselves? And, or, you know, as like Bio would say, you know, coming off the highway, you know, like how can you come off the highway of modernity? And that's, again, you know, very, very hard for many of us who are so dependent on that story, whether we like it or not. But I think, yes, perspective it's everything, isn't it? And it's space then. And again, the culture is like, it's so phobic of space and
Yes.
slowing down and, yeah, taking time out, which is probably why most psychedelics have been made illegal. It's not because of dangers. It's because of dangers to stop questioning the story of this reality. You know, it's the danger of perspective, the danger of other perspectives. You know, it's like, because it's only through those experiences where we start to go, I didn't realize it wasn't quite what I thought it was. You know what I mean? Oh, hold on a sec. There's a lot more going on here. Obviously, I'm simplifying, but you know what I mean. But there is something about, perspective, how to create perspective, or the ability to widen these perspectives and other ways of seeing and knowing the world feels, again, very, very vital. And again, I come back to the walking thing, because again, that is again what I see with that stuff, and is even, you know, they can be non-ordinary, very non-ordinary experiences, because there'll be some ritual and ceremony involved in a, you know, in a pilgrimage walk or whatever, and a sense of crossing or moving through a threshold, some kind of portal, some sort of threshold moment. And maybe it's thresholds. How can we create more threshold moments that allow us to sort of step out from this very fixed, stuck machine reality, and to experience something different? And the Wheel of the Year is an interesting one. Again, another thing that we work with quite a lot in our crew work is working to the Celtic Wheel of the Year, the sort of 8 moments that, again, at least allow us to sort of, even just through very simple things, allow us to go, oh, hold on, there is another cycle that's going on. There is a bigger, longer, more ancient relationship, you know, series of moments and thresholds, and trying to find more of that, which allows us maybe to see ourselves a little bit differently.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that, and I think that that's what's needed. And it's interesting because when we're speaking about perspective, we're also tacitly speaking about imagination. And there's this imaginative atrophy that just pervades and contributes to that stuckness, because it's hard for people to imagine that there might be some other way. You know, I've spoken with people, even my brother and close friends I'll speak to, and they'll often talk about these topics as fantastical or idealistic or overly utopian, you know, that the system is so powerful and so enmeshed. You know, it's in our neurobiology, the way that we regulate our dopamine and serotonin and our reward structures. It's really colonized everything. So again, to speak to the naysayers, like when I hear that, I resonate with it, and I go, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like it has, and it is difficult to imagine another way, but the imaginative capacity of the human being is maybe our greatest gift. You know, it's generative. It has this kind of cosmic animist, life-giving force to it. You know, and if we weaken the imagination, and again, that's where psychedelics come in, because they kind of unlock and massage and facilitate imaginative thinking and stuff like this. But when, for most of us, we're closed off imaginatively and socially discouraged from pursuing art and music and poetry and creativity, it creates this culture of stuckness and deadness. And I wonder what your thoughts are, if you think more song, more poetry, more music, more dance, more psychedelics, if you think all of that stuff would be helpful in helping to get things moving again.
Yeah. Oh, this brings up a lot actually, because I guess there's a few things that are coming up as I'm listening. So I guess the first bit is, yes, it's very hard for us to imagine anything different. And yet we're also recognizing that this story, this way of seeing the world and ourselves and our place within it in Earth time is like a nanosecond, right? So it's kind of like, I don't know how you can't, how do you put years on this? You know, it could be 1,000 years, it could be 5,000 years, it could be 500 years, whatever it is that this story has been sort of, this human centered, dominating species that's separate from everything else, that's based on this kind of capture and control. And even if we put it at 5,000 years, right, or 10,000 years, that's still a nanosecond, really, in Earth time. So it's a very, very recent thing. And of course, intellect, again, but when you're born into it, this is all you know. How can you possibly think of anything different? But we know enough, I think, that we could at least be starting to sort of explore that. Okay, so if we know that, we know that this is a tiny moment, and yet it feels like it's everything, right? Because it's the point that we're at. It's the, we've never globalized a planet before, and we've never, all these things that have happened that have made us, that have got to this moment. And at the same time, we've never had so much fucking information to tell us like how absurd this is. Do you know what I mean? It's not like we're going, oh my God, like what's going on? It's like, we've got so much information to tell us like, this is what's going on. This is how we got here. This is how we could respond differently. So we've never been we're overwhelmed with information. And that's a problem. But I think it's a helpful exercise to just to keep reminding ourselves that, yes, and there were many factors that have got us here, and, discovering, this most absurdly powerful fuel ever, in the depths of the earth, probably, had it's probably contributed quite massively to this whole moment. And yet at the same time, we are creative creatures. We are creative beings. I was born in the 70s, right? So when I went to school, we actually had a subject called nature, which I remember well, and often meant just exploring outside in the woodlands and all the beings and insects. And it's like, it blows my mind that we don't have even that, right? How mad is that, right? That we're still like the actual thing that we are, that everything is nested in. We don't even teach it unless it's a forest school thing on the side, but it's not in our curriculums. That's the absurdity of the hubricity of where we've got to. Okay, but I think we're starting to understand that. But I grew up, the woods was the internet. That's where you went to kind of explore and play and create and imagine. In my short lifespan, I've experienced the arrival of the internet. I worked as a design researcher for many years. I spent probably 6 years working with Nokia and design teams, inventing the smartphones. I saw that. I worked on those things, saw the possibility of them, was really blown away by the possibilities of them, and then have experienced, their impacts as well. So I sort of feel like, I don't know, in my own little way, I feel like I've kind of seen quite a lot that's happened that I could never have imagined, you couldn't imagine, but how quickly it's happened as well. How fast that's happened. It's insane, and I have my own children who are sort of who've grown up with this stuff. And so I often sort of try and sort of time travel a bit and go, God, that's interesting to see how much has changed, and it's an information problem or it's a communication problem, but I don't think it's anything. I think it is it's deeply relational. So back to creativity, we are very creative beings as humans. That has been, sort of again, creativity, as we know, has been become a thing where you think, oh, the way we've been invited or not invited or allowed to develop our own creative capacities has been extraordinarily limited, and it's been overwhelmingly bad, the impact that's had. But I think everyone has that creative capacity in them to express themselves. And it's a fundamental thing of being human. And what I see is like, again, this moment in time is like, we desperately need to help people just find that creative expression in themselves. Not in a way of like, oh my God, I've got to be creative and, can I do this thing well? And, but to live creatively, to express oneself, to have that kind of energy that's there and find ways to express it through whatever means that might be. I think that feels so vital again at the moment. And the imagination piece, like, we work a lot with in the Becoming Crew work. We have these three things we talk about: connection practice, creative practice, and the practice of service. And they're all entangled and they're not linear. But as a whole, they do support each other. So there is something around imagination, but there's also the sense of like where imagination can also take us when it is untethered from the operating principles on this planet. If it is untethered, it is disconnected from consequence and limits and relationship, or when imagination becomes very individualistic, and it's very sort of what, how do I imagine this world for me? And what does that look like from a sort of collective imagination perspective, or how does it look like when we're thinking of our impacts on our past, our ancestors, our future ancestors, our more than human family? So I think these things sort of working together can be really interesting, because if we are in some form of connection with community, with land, with other beings, again, what I experience and what I see is that that actually brings a kind of creative energy, a creative intelligence starts to come through, that then you can begin to work with in whatever way feels right for you, whether that's gardening, playing music, creating something in your community, writing, art, food, whatever it is, right? Any kind of creative practice. I think how to encourage that, how to open up, because I think it really matters as well to hear, just to feel what people are feeling, to experience how people are feeling through creative practice is essential. And if anything, just so our future ancestors, whoever they might be, have got some fucking idea of what the hell we were feeling at this moment, I mean, at the very least, let's just start creating more, so that at least there's some artifact that says, oh God, actually people were feeling quite a lot. But I fundamentally believe that we're a creative species, right? It's inherent in us, and it's been hijacked by the sort of heads, the sort of, the kind of heady, rational logic. But, you can see, right? And so it's an undernourished part of us, an under-cultivated part of us, our creative parts. And I think it's, really, really important. And it's something we work with a lot in our crew work at this creative inquiry. Again, just sort of not trying to overload people's ability to be creative, but just to say, like, what wants to come through you, like, even if it's just working with writing or sketching or modeling or making or tending to things or growing things or movement or music or food or whatever, but just how can you just, again, try and practice something based on how you are feeling, how you're experiencing. Again, I think these are the things where possibilities are going to open up through these kind of things. If we just sit here and try and think our way into this future, we're fucked, basically. Pardon my language, but we have to feel our way in. We have to express ourselves. We have to sort of listen and see and notice how other people are expressing and feeling, and I think beautiful things are happening through those approaches, and I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, thank you for that. But before I forget, I wanted to jump back to something, but which I should have addressed already, because a few times you've mentioned becoming crew, and so I want to give people some context around that. But I think to even give them context around that, you'll have to step back a little bit and talk about these two stories. So I wanted to give you some space to just expand on this idea and fill people in so they know what you mean when you say becoming crew.
Yeah, gosh, I like metaphors. And stories. They've always been quite key in the work that I've ended up doing. Where to begin? So I guess I've spent 20 years of my professional working life, what I would often describe as down a climate change rabbit hole. It's sort of 2007 when I was doing this work as a design researcher, actually with Nokia, is where I first fell down this climate change rabbit hole, and I feel like I've sort of never really come back up, although I have, but I feel like it's sort of, it's been this kind of, it was a doorway, a portal of some sort that I've ended up I've held on to the thread and haven't let go of it, and it's taken me into lots of different experiences. But I think I spent 10 years from that discovery on a very intense 10 years of my life, which was sort of both very, very personal and through my professional work, which was like a kind of like, oh my God, we are really fucked. And I don't think anyone really knows how fucked we are. Sort of, that was how I experienced it. I was in this kind of professional moment, I had a young family, I had a mortgage, I was living in London, I was working like flat out, was traveling all the time. It would be perceived as a very good, you're doing really well, you know what I mean? But I was in it, so I was committed. I had responsibilities and a lot of financial responsibilities and life responsibilities. And then I was sort of doing this work and I was good at what I did. But, the metrics of good, whatever, was different. But it was, and then I discovered this, for what I described to me was just like that it was an illusion. The whole thing is built on an illusion that is destroying the very thing that creates the conditions for the illusion to exist, if that makes sense. And yeah, it was very, very deep. I can't really explain it. It was such a sort of deep, visceral time, and again, I found out in later life that I'm autistic, ADHD, perhaps those traits were at play in the way I was responding, but I didn't know that at the time. I responded very, very, I had this kind of real urgency, like I got to do something about this. And and the best thing I can do is stay in this place that I'm in and try and affect change from here, So the work I tried to do for many years was inside big corporate business, brands, big brands who were starting to explore, and starting to speak of this thing of sustainability and, how are you going to exist in a world that's going to be, struggling with resources and all this kind of stuff. And so this is 2007, 2009, 2010. So it was still a very kind of, we were all, those of us that were trying to do this work, we were a very small group, and it was difficult because you're challenging a lot of beliefs. Anyway, long story short, I spent 10 years, I would say, trying to do this, what I would say is more communication focused work. It was this work, like if we could talk about this in creative ways, if we can bring more people together to understand it, and, we help people understand that we're just part of this living thing, and, nature is not a thing over there, it's ours, and everything is nature, everything is the earth, everything we're creating, touching, doing is the thing. If we can just communicate that, we'll get there. Anyway, realize that that's just not how it works. And I went on this very deep, personal, what I would call rewilding of my own self, alongside the work I was doing. I realized quite quickly that it was, at least for me, I saw this relationship crisis. It was actually about our relationship with this living earth. And I remember I spent 2 years doing this master's, and I was studying with Dr. Stefan Harding from Schumacher College, who's no longer with us, but he was 2009, and I spent a week with him, and we did this whole exploration of Gaia, and it was one of those moments where you're like, oh my God, and he showed us this piece of work called The Great Acceleration, which was a sort of a research project which kind of shows you this inarguable relationship between growth-based competitive economies and the acceleration of that model and the total decline in the living world that supports that. And it's just, it's just this parallel hockey curves on every level. And you're like, yeah. And it was so I decided that the only way I could try and cope with doing this work was to sort of rewire myself. And that's kind of what I did. And I think as I got further into this kind of creative, communicating, innovation-based work, realizing that without the individual transformation, the community transformation, we're just going to keep doing the same thing. So I guess this element of, deeper transformation started to creep into the work. I got very interested in Bucky Fuller's work at that time for a while, mainly because I just thought actually, it's just the idea. It was a metaphor, really, of the spaceship Earth. I just felt was a really another interesting metaphor that could help us maybe understand being, part of a living entity, a whole entity that has this ability to regenerate itself. But there is a system, there are operating principles, and that we are all either participating in that regeneration or we're just participating in its, we're either passengers or we're crew, right? So we'd use that metaphor a lot in convening, in trying to help see that all of these different crises that people were working with were actually all part of the same thing, and seeing that we are also on this fucking mysterious bloody thing. It's like, hello, it is a life-giving rock. It is a fucking miracle we're all here. Maybe we should celebrate that a bit more often as well, and maybe there's some other stuff going on outside of the machine. So for all these reasons, it became a story that I got quite infatuated with, and probably the autism. And then 2018, I had a sort of very serious kind of burnout breakdown from all this work, and a lot of difficult things started happening in my family, health challenges. And I started the podcast, and just as a way to start having conversations about the things that I felt like we weren't able to have in these corporate gatherings, and just weren't talking about the thing. As soon as you bring the flame in, everyone's like, fuck that. It's like, stop being so depressing, all that stuff, so I started the podcast so I realized there were so many amazing people doing things. There's so many people that understood this entanglement, this relationship, this way of being that is the fundamental, for me, part of regeneration. It's just that we're all alive. We're all cycling through living processes. And so I started the podcast. I called it The Spaceship Earth because I was just fascinated with this story. And over the years, in first lockdown, a lot of my work disappeared. The podcast was maybe 3 years old, and I just had a hunch that maybe there was an interest in doing some learning journey work around, what I would call action learning. This is what I trained up in my master's, and it's just become this real way of working, just learning through inquiry, experimentation, peer learning, centering our connection to this living earth, and working with our questions to become active participants of change. And so I decided to call that offering Becoming Crew. And this idea is it's this ongoing invitation into seeing ourselves as participants like every other living thing on the spaceship. I started with a 6-month learning journey, and 12 people came on it, and we learned shitloads, and beautiful people just working with wonderful questions. And this idea of we're supporting each other on our inquiries and centering this connection practice at the heart of it, and the reality that we are living in a time where the separation story is collapsing, and just moving from that place. And so, and over the last 5 years, we've tried lots of different offerings and experiences, and it's very organic, and it's very hand to mouth, and the economics don't fucking work, and but we're still here and doing it. And so that's the crew, that's the Becoming Crew work. And now it manifests through, I continue the podcast. I had a break from it for the last 3 months, about to start recording, but we're in sort of year 8. And the learning journeys, we've done some kind of, themed things. We did a thing called the Remix, which is all around story and narrative. And I sometimes bring guests in from the pod who come and do, they'll host learning experiences. It's all about, for me, it's experiential learning. It's all the time. So how do we not just listen and talk all the time, but how do we experience, how do we play, how do we practice? And we offer seasonal things. We do a piece of work every year in the winter called Into the Dark, which is this exploration of this darker time, and this dance between what we can do online and what we can do out on the land. And now we have a land-based project that we're stewarding very close to where I live. So we're doing offerings on the land. And as I said at the start, I've been having this very strong vision, but it came from a vision quest 3 years ago of wanting to think, was there something I could offer a younger generation with this work? And we've been exploring that the last couple of years, and we've just launched our first thing, which is actually focused on for young men, and it's called Famous for 5 Miles, the Gary Snyder, because it's all about belonging and place and identity, and what does it mean to be part of where you are. So yeah, that is a rambling explanation of the Becoming Crew work. But really, we're what I call it, we're called an action learning collective. That's what we are. We're trying to build these practices of connection and creativity and service to really feel that we can regenerate what is around us, because it is so much now about this. And actually, Bucky Fuller said that. He said, like, the regenerative universe is created. It's created through local participation. It's not like we don't create the system out there. It's through the showing up, in the moment, the how are we, wherever we are, wherever we're at. My belief is as I get older and slightly more broken by I realize I know less and less less and less, I sort of feel like there's an inherent trust, maybe, just to step into what is what is asked to do, what's in front of us, what can we do with the tools we have in the place that we're at. And so it has a strong sort of resonance to place. So
Yeah, and thank you for that work and for that passion and drive. And I'm sure that there are lots of times when it's difficult to keep moving, especially when you look around and see what's happening. So I can't even imagine. I can't even put myself in the headspace. So I think it's such important work and such beautiful work and great work. And it's the direction that I want to move in as well. So I'm happy to see you out there doing this stuff, because it's inspiring and gives me hope, and you're somebody that I admire in that space. So yeah, that's just amazing. So thank you for sharing the story about that. And I know our time is getting close, so I just wanted to do a time check with you before I launch into another flurry of questions that you just inspired.
Yeah, I'm good. I would also add that I'm lucky because I have an extraordinary group of fellow humans around me that work with me to do this work, because it is, you can't do this without crews. I mean, I think that's the other thing. We recognize that we can't do this alone. We need each other. We've been able to kind of bring it to where it is, and it's still here, and we're it's a living thing. But there's a core group, including a lot of my family, who've ended up involved in this mad process. So it's like, my partner, who's been the sort of real kind of operations engine behind it all, and I work with my son now. He's working on this young men's work with us, and then my fellow guides and collaborators who continue to sort of hold and evolve this work together, and then all of the more than human kin who have really shaped a lot of this work. Has been shaped by what I receive and continue to have received and continue to receive from my tree kin and the spirit world and the places that I spend a lot of time in, who all of those beings have also deeply influenced not just the work but the encouragement to keep going with it. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. I like rooting down into the relational aspect of it. I think that's important. So thank you for that distinction. And to start to wrap us up, I think it's important maybe to mention or dig in a little bit to this young men's work, because I don't think it's a coincidence that so many people are focusing on this group, not because we're in a patriarchal system, which, we are, but because men inside that system are also harmed by that system in ways that are often invisible. They're confused. They have poor role models. You go online and you see Andrew Tate and clavicular, and this is what young men are taking inspiration from. Like, there's a problem. So I was wondering if you could speak to what you saw when you looked at young men that prompted you to say, hey, we should be working with them.
Yeah, it's a good question. So my original intention, I came off this vision quest, which was sort of 3 years ago, pretty much next week. And I had many things happen on that quest. For me, it was a moment in my life to really try and process a lot of grief, which I'd been just suppressing for such a long time, which was coming from many, many experiences in my life. in which the quest was really so helpful for that. And then I think space opened up in the 4 days and 4 nights, and I had this just really, really, really very, very strong clarity around what might be mine to do for a younger generation. That was really what I came away with. My initial intention was looking at mixed identities, and decided to focus in on this sort of 18 to sort of mid-20s, mainly because it felt like the style of our crew work, the sort of creative inquiry, all these elements, it felt appropriate, more appropriate. And then also the complexities of working with this is young adults. So you go below that, it's more complex in terms of safeguarding and all kinds of stuff that maybe we weren't necessarily as geared up for. So that was the sort of intention. So started gathering small groups of mixed identities, genders, to really just out on the land again, just to create space for listening, really, and just to see like how are they feeling about life and their future and what's missing and what kind of help would be helpful and what are the things that are really overwhelming. And and we just sort of learnt loads again about the need for space, and space out on the land, and space where one can be can express themselves, where there's creative possibility and invitation, and it's okay not to know, and there's going to be no agendas and all the all the things and so that was the route I was going down. And sort of, I guess I'm a real sort of prototyper. I tend to sort of like feel an interest, an idea that feels bubbling, and then we'll go out and try prototype, bring people together and learn from it, and then see if it can travel. And tried to then actually, see whether we could get some support to help us enable, to hold and guide these kind of experiences. And there is some rites of passage work. So myself and my fellow guys, we're quite, we've done a lot of training ourselves and continue to do a lot of training in kind of nature-based rites of passage work, wilderness guiding, which for us is sort of, again, quite foundational. But then it's always how do we go back into our communities after these experiences, and that we feel that we can do something with this, and we have the support to bring these changes into our communities and our places, whatever. So that's always that dynamic in the becoming crew work. It's not just to have the experience, it's like, what do we do with it? But we were struggling to find support for it. And I think last year was very strange. Just a series of things happened that kept saying young men, young men, young men. And some of it was really personal. Some of it felt like there was almost, again, I felt like I was receiving a kind of, and that was actually quite uncomfortable, because in my head I was like, can I do this? Like, can I do men's? It's weird, a lot of the people that come on becoming crew work majority it's women. It's always skews like 70% women. I think 60-70% of the listeners on the podcast would identify as women. We see most of the people out in the field who are trying to bring the change about are women. There is a real lack of men, and there's clearly many, many complex reasons for that. But that was a knowing. So that was a kind of like, why is this that there are increasingly less men? That conversation we had at the start of this when we were talking about how do we reach other groups. One of those things for me has been men. How do we reach men?
Yes.
To be with this moment of collapse, to be with this time of unraveling, and to feel that they can be with it, because it's clearly a problem. So that was coming up. And then this other thing of, what if it isn't working immediately with mixed genders? What if it is young men? Maybe that's the start point. So so this was last year, it was just happening. I would just keep running into this question. What about the young men? What about the young men? And I have a boy who's 21. I'm incredibly lucky. I have a beautiful relationship with him, and a very open relationship with him, always have done. And it's an inquiry we have been having ourselves, but not because we're thinking, we should do, it's just been there, because he's questioning, he's questioning his identity, in this moment and what it means to be a young man. And I'm processing and have been, like many men still, my own masculine identity and, what even is that, and what kind of man am I, and and all of, again, because it's deep, right, and it's complex and it's fucking generational and it's like it's hard. And so I think there was this natural it was emerging, let's say, and it just felt, it felt right. And then one of our crew guides, Mark DeLissa, who is a poet and a youth mentor here in the city we live in, and he'd been doing quite a lot of work with young men, mentoring. And I think one day we just sat down and said, should we just try and do something with young men? And he was like, yeah. And we're like, well, should we just try and gather a few and just, get them on the land for a day and a night and start with that? So that's what we did last autumn. And it was like this, it was 24 hours, and it was just like, we learned so much, as older men. And there was an energy as well with these young men that was just like, just felt really alive and important and wild in some sense, and really beautiful. And so I think, as I said, I've told you a little moment about that story, but we really allowed the land to sort of inform the experience. And I think we came out of that and we thought, there's something here in this, in really not knowing and not trying to over complicate what it is we're doing. But we learned enough about what this particular group were experiencing and how they're seeing themselves. And we learned a lot about shame, and a lot about shame, and a lot about not knowing, and identity, and trust, and who do you trust, what do you trust, and again the potential of being on land and allowing that magic also to be there. And and then we just decided to really go for it and shape something, and that's what we've been doing. And then we've just literally been backed by a foundation to run a pilot for the next 18 months, which is what we're in. We've just literally in the process of starting our outreach. It's called Famous for 5 Miles, because we're definitely putting this inquiry into belonging and place, and this idea of what would it mean in a world that's telling us all to have like fame and recognition. What would it mean to be kind of rooted somewhere? So that's what we're sort of starting. So that's the work. But we're very much exploring not just, but also what might be theirs to do, because we're still in this thing of like, if we can't help young people, all people also find what's theirs to do, and feel that they can create responsibility for what is going on around them. I think it's so important. Like, we can rant about the state of the world, but there has to be some stepping in, some sense of responsibility. So again, we're exploring that dance of the inner knowing and then the outer action and stuff. But it's a really beautiful project, because we've been back to do it in a very experimental research, test and learn way. So it feels really amazing for how we work, to find someone that wants to support that type of approach, and just to learn. And we've got some assumptions which will be blown apart, I'm sure. Would have totally got it wrong, but that's the point of it. So hopefully next year we will have something very tangible that we'll be putting out in the world. But we're on this journey of listening really at the moment. So we've got gatherings and walks and circles and experiences now planned from now really till the end of this year with young men in our bioregion. And let's see what comes through it. But it's exciting, and really, I'm definitely on my learning edge. I'm right on my edge. It's uncomfortable. It was just finally on your question. It was definitely something that I was like, I felt really uncomfortable. Like, can I do this work with young men? Because it's not what I thought. It wasn't what I was thinking. But I think where I got to the fact that because it makes me feel uncomfortable, it's mine to do.
There's great wisdom in that sentence. Yeah, thank you for all of that. That's beautiful work, important work, and I could feel your authenticity, and I admire your ability to say that you had that doubt and you were questioning whether this is right, because I think that that's an important part of the process that people often don't speak about. So I'm happy that you're able to voice that and share it. So thank you for feeling comfortable enough to say that with me.
Yeah, thank
Maybe
you.
being here with our shirts off.
Here with that shirt, so exactly. And as I've said it again, I'm very lucky. My boy Finn. I work very close. We're working very closely, and without him, I don't think he's definitely. We're helping each other. I think we're through this inquiry, but I think it's a wonderful thing to have that, to be working closely with him with this work, and I think that's giving me more confidence to trust how I feel about this.
Yeah, and Dan, I could talk to you for another hour. I've forgotten about the heat in the van. It's an incredible achievement, but I simultaneously want to be respectful of your time. So I want to open it up to space for you, where if there's something you wanted to explore, a topic or something you have going on, or something that's been on your mind that you haven't found a place to give voice to in your own circles or on your own podcast, if there's anything that this conversation has stirred in you, just give you space to do whatever you want with here at the time at the end.
Thank you. I have to be careful because as you know, I can ramble. No, do you know what? I've really enjoyed this conversation, and it's made me, I really appreciated this space that you've created, and I stumbled across your work, and I love how you've been putting it out. I love the way that you are, how you're expressing these conversations, these stories, and I think for me, it's just reminded me in this conversation. It's reminded me because I've had a few months off my pod, but it's reminded me of how, because podcasting can be a funny old, lonely old, weird endeavor, right? It takes a lot of work, which I think folks don't quite grasp. And I get a sense from you and what I listen to and how you're doing it. It feels quite similar to me in terms of like I do these podcasts. I realize how much I receive from them, and then it's beautiful that others find them. But yeah, I think you've just reminded me, or this experience has reminded me, I'm starting to record again next week. So I'm just reminded me, I think I got into the last few months, like, should I even bother keep going with this thing? Because it's like, there's so much out there and there's so much to do. And because I've had so much going on in the place, like my work has become so local focused in the last couple of years, which is great. But, land-based projects also just extraordinarily intensive on time and responsibility, and so I think I've just these the conversations have not been happening, but I've realized through this process of conversation just how helpful I find the conversation. It's a form of processing and sense making for me, and I've really enjoyed this because you've helped me make some sense of some stuff, a lot that's been going on. So I think I'm just that's what I'm sitting with is like, okay, that's good. I'm quite pleased I'm starting the recording again next week, and you've given me I feel a renewed sense of commitment to continue with sharing these stories and these conversations, because they are, I'm sure you find the same, but I realise that they are, this is what we've got, right? We've got to sort of work with what's going on and keep sharing how we are in this moment, and what is possible and what else is happening, and that can be expansive and opening. Because I think we're living in such limiting. It feels. I think that's the paradox, the madness as well of the time. It almost feels like, all this technology, all of this stuff we do, and what are we fucking doing with it? Just blowing shit up and
Yes.
and keeping everyone locked in this very, very limited reality way of seeing things. And it's like, fuck, there is so much more that's happening as it is, and there's so much more possibility for us as a species. Yeah, so talking about those things and sharing those things and creating spaces for those things to be spoken to feels really vital. And yeah, I just want to say respect to you, because I know firsthand this is hard, sitting in sweaty vans and recording conversations and editing them and putting them out and trying to bloody promote them in a world that doesn't make any sense. When you try and do any promotion, you're like, does anyone even see this? You know what I mean? Do I do hashtags anymore? Does that help? I mean, well, oh, fuck knows. So it's like, so yeah, I just say respect to you, because it's yeah, you're doing this stuff in a really beautiful way. And yeah, thank you for having me on, and thank you for reminding me that rambling is a important social technology in these times, I think. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Dan. I'm just flowing with gratitude at the moment. It's beautiful to hear you say that. Yeah, it's meaningful for me, so that's I'm touched. So thank you for your kind words, and for all the work you do, and for not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. You're out there doing it. So I'm happy to have had this very memorable, unique exchange with you with the sweat and the shirtlessness and the bread. It's a very yeasty conversation.
Isn't it? It's very live, very live. We're really sort of expressing our entanglement here, and yeah, our connections with all that is not human.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you so much. Anytime you want to do this again, I'm happy to do it. The invitation is always open. So thanks
Beautiful.
for passing through.
Well, maybe thank you so much. But maybe we'll do one when the 2 years down, when the men's work has been, all the research has been there, and we can hopefully we're up and running with all kinds of stuff. But it would be lovely to reflect back on what this what this new adventure brings.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful. And say the word, I'll be there.
Awesome. Look after yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you for passing through today. Yeah, you, dear listener. Thank you for your support, for your attention, for spending some time with me and this episode's guest. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe, rate it, like it, tell your friends about it, buy a billboard somewhere next to a highway promoting it. I mean, I'm kidding, of course, but your support really does mean a lot to me. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next time.